Hey everyone, and welcome to DnD Horror Stories with DnD Doge. In today's video, we have a story about how the Mercer Effect strikes again, leading to a group splitting up due to differing views on Critical Role. A story about a Westmarch server that's, well, a Westmarch server, and much more. But before we get into those, I have to ask that if you end up enjoying the video, that you consider giving it a like, and even leave a comment. It really does help out the channel by letting the almighty algorithm know to show it to other people who might be interested. Right, Ziggy?
Yes, do those things. Yay, a string. Meow.
Such a wise kitty, that one. But with that said, let's get into some D&D horror stories. Dungeon Master ruins game and group trying to emulate Critical Role by Reddit user rpghorrorstories. This was back when Critical Role had just started their second campaign. The group was the DM, me, and 4 other people. The Dungeon Master and one of the players were really into Critical Role, to the point that the first half hour to hour of every session was just the 2 of them talking about Critical Role. Eventually, the Dungeon Master starts introducing characters from the series, starts telling us what we should do, quote, "'cause they did that in Critical Role," and starts trying to copy Matt Mercer's particular DM style, to the point that I wasn't having fun, and I felt like I had no agency, and our actions in-game had no point, since he would attempt to retcon things, or ignore things to get a particular outcome. Eventually, things came to a head when one of the guys dropped out, and that was the push for me to say the same. I loved playing, but I'm not a huge Critical Role fan, and I have no interest in blatantly copying other people's stories. Dungeon Master reacted badly, and went on a tirade about how he's playing D&D properly, and we were ruining the game for him and that one other player. We tried to tell him that he's ruining the game for all the other players, except one, and that she was getting clear favoritism because she was going along with it, attempting to recreate scenes from the series. I even tried to explain that Matt Mercer has his own style. He has years of experience, probably took lessons in acting and improv, and has a team of people to help with writing, and that it's his career. He just accused me of being jealous of Matt Mercer, and not knowing what Dungeons & Dragons really is. I saw him post in a Discord server not long after, and he was explicitly looking for people who watch and like Critical Role. I hope he found a group of like-minded people to play with. He was a great Dungeon Master before he decided that Matt Mercer is the only standard of DMing. Well, looks like the Mercer Effect strikes again. It really is a shame that there are people out there that think that D&D needs to be exactly like Critical Role, and in this case, to the point of doing exactly what they do on the show. Now, it would be one thing if the Dungeon Master just wanted to have the same setting as Critical Role. Heck, I think they even made a sourcebook of Matt Mercer's homebrew setting. But it sounds like this DM and the other player just wanted to act out the exact story that Critical Role was doing. I mean, I like Critical Role and watch it from time to time, and I think it probably has done some good in bringing people to the hobby. The only problem with that is, you'll get people that want it to be exactly like Critical Role, and don't understand that the show has a whole production crew behind them, and that they are all professional voice actors. Like OP said, hopefully the Dungeon Master found players that just want to act out the events in Critical Role. And hopefully, OP and the other players were able to find a Dungeon Master that wasn't so obsessed with Matt Mercer's DMing style. On to the next one. Other players knocked me out and cut off my limbs. Dungeon Master rewarded them for it. By Reddit user Miserable Message 12. We're playing a pretty ruthless campaign, and we all know that. However, What I was not prepared for was yesterday's session. My character, who had been the jolly bard with no enemies, playing music and making food for the party, lost the MacGuffin a few sessions ago. I was attacked by the BBEG's vampire daughter, and she almost killed me, and stole the MacGuffin that I was carrying inside my ribcage. At the time, this was a very important step in my bard's character development, and we worked off of it very well, with him losing all self-worth, having PTSD-induced panic attacks, and even self-harming at one point. This is where the horror story begins. My bard, Yastrix, had fallen asleep in the forest and wakes up to the two artificers, Tagror and Engel, standing above him with the daughter that had assaulted me. Naturally, I acted out a panic attack due to this being the day after I was attacked to begin with. What happened next shocked me to my very core. I expected a stern talking to, but instead, my own party members attacked me, knocked me out, tortured me, and lastly, sliced off my left arm and the thumb on my right hand, and left me in the forest. All the while, the dungeon master was laughing his ass off and complimenting them on it being despicable and dark. After this, I was left in the forest, and the two artificers went back to the daughter's house. She went, "I am sorry about your bard friend. Let me make it up to him. How about I enhance your weapons?" And then buffed their weapons, while I was left half dead and unconscious in the forest, with nothing but a half-useless character. Well, first off, what the hell? So, this vampire chick, who is the daughter of the BBEG, steals the campaign's MacGuffin from out of OP's character's ribcage, which I won't even question that. But then OP's party assaults him in the forest with the same person who stole said MacGuffin? That alone is already confusing, but then the DM rewards those players for doing that? It sounds to me like they are purposely picking on OP at that point. I mean, the whole thing doesn't make sense otherwise. Normally, I would say to talk to the DM and the other players about how what they did was really messed up, but if I'm being honest, I think it would probably just be best for OP to not go back to that game and find another group to play with. Though, what are your thoughts on this one? Let's move on. A That Guy Scenario by Reddit user Elaine Grewald. I was part of a Westmarch 5e server years ago that originally started on Kick. At the time, I was brand new to tabletop RPGs and got into it thanks to Critical Role. Things seemed good at first. We were allowed to roleplay at almost any time, as there were places for out-of-quest stuff. I, unfortunately, have a few horror stories of this Westmarch and the people in it, but I will limit this one to someone I will call Mark. For some context on Mark, he was a friend of multiple DMs and admins, I will call them Kane and Joy, in the Westmarch, and was also known to very frequently try to get broken or overpowered things for his characters, as well as not playing well with others. Now, Mark used to be an admin and a DM, but both privileges were taken away from him for another incident. When I joined, I made a ranger, my first ever character in any tabletop RPG. I was awkward and didn't really know what to do or how to roleplay with people, but I did end up meeting my current significant other through it. My first quest in the server went great. We completed the objective and all got home safely. The problem starts when Mark decided to show up. Mark had a level 8 or 9 ASMR Conquest Paladin that had a homebrew rule to keep some small semblance of their previous Werebear curse. They also had a Gloomstalker Ranger. As it is a Westmarch, people were allowed to have multiple characters, so they don't have to be locked into a quest all the time. My Ranger, the Warlock, who was my future significant other, the Furbolg Druid, and the warlock's at the time significant other, who I can't remember their character, went on a mission to resolve an issue with a group of hill giants attacking merchants on the road. My character had some backstory stuff with giants, and even knew the language, so she proposed that we talk to them to help them relocate. Then in comes Mark. We were talking about it for around 10 minutes before an arrow comes out of nowhere and hits a giant. Then more and more, as Mark's ranger made themselves known to everyone. The four of us just stood there, shocked, as a player who never even signed up for the quest, or even out of character asked to be part of it, was now doing our quest. We decided to just leave the quest alone and go home. Later, after that, we found out that the DM, Kane, who is Mark's friend, secretly did side stuff in a private message to have Mark's ranger secretly follow us, and never told anyone about it. You'd think that that is the end, but nope. After a year or so, I tried out being a dungeon master. I liked it, and even though I made some beginner mistakes, everyone seemed excited when I would offer to run quests for people. I got frustrated once, when the players hadn't been that invested in the roleplay and seemed to just want to do combat. I tried really hard at making a really compelling line of quests for them to do, and they would all be distracted when their turn would come up. I said as much, and Mark came in and started to blame me for everything. He wasn't even part of the quest. Even before this, he would harass me every chance he got, and was never punished for it because 2 of the 3 admins were his friends. This was the point that I actually quit playing for 6 months. I eventually cooled down and missed playing the game with my friends, so I came back and would only run quests for people that I knew didn't like Mark as well. Eventually, he even tried to file a complaint with the admins that I was giving away experience to my significant other and my character for next to nothing, just because I would not advertise it for him to know about it. In the end, most of everyone who made that server alive left, because of Mark, and it now sits dead in the ether. Not really sure if I have a moral for the story, but definitely don't just lie down and take abuse from people like I did. Now, I've never been part of a Westmarch server, but from a lot of stories I've read, it seems like they are really breeding grounds for tons of drama, especially when you throw someone like Mark and favoritism into the mix. For Mark to secretly conspire with that one DM to sabotage OP's party attempt at diplomacy with the Giants does certainly point to Mark having that guy tendencies, so I don't doubt OP's claims of him harassing them or other players. Though, by the sounds of it, OP no longer has to deal with Mark, as the Westmarch server basically died, and at least they got a relationship out of it. So silver linings and all that. Let's move on to the next post. Dungeon Master Origin Story Comes Full Circle by Reddit user Gabriel Wingu. When my roommate and I were first getting into D&D, it was at the height of 4th edition. After a few weeks of Adventure League, where we were placed at a table with Bad DM and his daughter, we ignored the red flag that Bad DM basically played Bad DM's daughter's character for her. Bad DM invited us to play in his new home game. Wanting to play more D&D really badly, we accepted, and he agreed to pick us up and bring us out to his home, which was slightly outside of the city, in about a week, and to have characters ready. When he picked us up the next week, there were red flags from the very start. Bad DM immediately informed us that 2 of his friends dropped out of the campaign because they couldn't agree with him on character concepts. We thought this was odd, because he didn't ask us anything about our characters in advance, but we thought maybe they were supposed to play NPCs, so no big deal. "So OP, what are you playing?" Bad DM asked. I answered, "Well, I love psionics, so I'm playing a Genasi Battlemind." Bad DM then said, what is it with you newbies and playing weird races and classes? Bad DM spoke with an air of condescension that would continue the rest of the night. From the back seat, roommate, smugly wanting to get the approval of this old-timer, said, "Not me. I'm playing an elf ranger, going to snipe some people with my bow." Bad DM just said, "You're playing a ranger and not a beastmaster? Guess someone doesn't know about how to build a character." So we sat, dejected in his car for the rest of the ride. Once we got to his home, Bad DM forces his daughter to join us when she clearly didn't want to, and introduced us to his friend, who took the Kenku mimicry thing really seriously, which was the delightful kind of annoying. We all handed in our backstories. He asked us for 1 page max written, which is fine, except Bad DM's daughter, who didn't write one. He carefully reads Kenku's and then puts them all aside and says, "I'll get to these later." We jump into a dungeon crawl where we kind of get waylaid by every decision we make, and eventually we get to a silver dragon who apparently worshipped Bahamut and who needed us to recover an object that was stolen from him. In the dragon's keep, there were a bunch of charred corpses, allegedly of the attackers, which roommate's character went to check out because in his backstory, he was afraid of dragons. When he was threatened by the dragon for trying to investigate the corpses, instead of listening to him, he attacked the dragon. Bad DM angrily asks him why, and roommate explained that his character was terrified, which Bad DM would have known if he had bothered to read any backstory other than Kenku's. We navigate through a very long fight, in which Kenku dies, and so does Bad DM's daughter. And then he just has the dragon teleport away and starts blaming roommate for them dying, especially where the corpses in the room were burned, which is not a silver dragon's breath weapon. So we should have known something was up and played along with the dragon so we didn't get killed. Roommate and I had been playing D&D for 6 weeks at this point in time. Angry, we asked Kenku to drive us home, since we didn't want to be around Bad DM anymore, since he continued berating us. Bad DM insisted that he take us, since Kenku lived in the other direction. And since Bad DM lived too far away to afford a taxi, we had to wait for Bad DM to take us home. Randomly, in the car, about halfway home, Bad DM's personality shifted to jovial and excited. When we got home, Bad DM told us how great the session was, and how much he looked forward to next week, though when he texted us, we didn't answer. That day, I decided that I would DM, so that roommate and any of our other friends didn't have to be DM'd by someone like Bad DM. I was bad at it at first, but I worked at it, practiced, picked up skills, took useful advice to heart, etc. Eventually, I DM'd a game to help my friends stay connected through COVID, a genuinely life-changing experience. Earlier this year, a new game shop opened up in my town, and they put out an open call for DMs to run games in their store. A friend who played in the COVID game put my name forward, and eventually I was chosen as one of their in-house DMs. At the first session, I asked everyone their experiences with D&D, and one player, a mother, expressed that she came from a home game that lasted a long time, but had several underlying concerns that made her seek out an in-store game for her son's first big play experience. She didn't elaborate any further at first. I shared that I got into DMing from my experience with Bad DM, but stopped short of naming him. I got a tattoo to celebrate becoming an in-house DM, because it felt like my story as a DM coming full circle. But I didn't know just how full circle. A couple weeks later, we were having a post-session chat, and Mother thanks me for making a setting that was inclusive to her and her son. She reveals that the DM that she didn't want to take her son to was Bad DM, and in a moment of shock, I revealed to her that he was why I was there too. Almost 15 years later, I did what I set out to do, not for a friend, but for a complete stranger. Well, that is one heck of a coincidence. And congrats to OP from going from that bad experience to being what I assumed to be a great dungeon master. It just goes to show that sometimes good things can come from bad experiences. Bad DM did sound like he lived up to his namesake, not even taking a few minutes to read the characters' backstories, and then having the dragon straight up fight the party at the beginning of the campaign. Sure, OP's roommate attacked the dragon out of fear, but the dungeon master could have just had the dragon swipe him away after the initial attack, and come up with a way for the dragon to hold him from attacking again. That could have been used to build upon roommate's character's story arc, if the dungeon master bothered to read the backstory, and the campaign could have continued without any characters dying in the first session. There were so many other creative ways for a bad DM to handle that situation, rather than just fighting. But at least this led OP down the path he took, and I wish for OP to run many great games in the future. Let's move on to today's final story. Fent, by Reddit user Autonomous Rhinoceros. I've been playing in this campaign for a little over a year. When we first started the campaign, there were a couple red flags right off the bat. First of all, no Session 0. We were hurled into a campaign with little to no descriptions of who our characters were, or why they were together. We were just expected to follow the quest that a random NPC gave us without question. I thought it was a little strange, but we all played along, and eventually, an interesting plot started forming. During that first session, one of the other players decided that they would have the same accent as my character. Since we were both from the same town, I figured it was logical, so I didn't think it was a big deal. But as time went on, they started to not just mimic the accent, but also my character's mannerisms. It seemed as though he just didn't think out a personality for his character originally, and just defaulted to copying mine. The player also treated D&D like a video game, primarily focusing on looting the bodies. Later on into the campaign, when one of our party members died in a battle, what do you think the very first thing he did was? Then, after a couple of sessions, I was wondering if I was playing with a bunch of murder hobos. One of the characters likes to eat human flesh, and turn his victims into furniture. Another is a criminal whose solution to everything is killing, kidnapping, or torturing NPCs to get what he wants. This all took place in a large, peaceful city, with a strong rule of law, and it made no sense why my lawful good character would stay around with this group of characters. But after a while, the thrill of being murder hobos died down, I guess, so I stuck with the group, and it was fun for the most part. There was still the random moment where a vampire player character who joined our party, again, no explanation given as to why, sacrificed an orphaned baby that I had rescued. But overall, it was okay. Overall was okay. After a baby sacrifice? Okay then. Now, for the past couple months, I haven't really enjoyed the game. The campaign has been so slow between random side quests we feel like we have to follow, players derailing the plot with repetitive mundane interactions with boring NPCs, lengthy and uninteresting combat encounters, etc. The Dungeon Master also added more players, so we have 7 now, which has slowed our sessions down even more. There's loud side chatter throughout the game, and through the Dungeon Master's session recaps and monologues, frequent interjections and descriptions from one player about what he thinks would be cool for other players to do with their characters, going off the rails with lengthy back and forths about a particular rule that doesn't even matter, and more. Now, I've recently joined another campaign where none of these problems exist, and I'm finally realizing that it's time to quit that first campaign. Still, I can't help but think Am I the one who's crazy? Because everyone else at the table has stuck through it this long and doesn't seem to have any problems with the things I described. No, I wouldn't say OP is crazy. It just sounds like they weren't compatible with that particular table. Everyone else seemed to be having fun, or at least if they weren't, they didn't say anything. It is good to hear that OP found another campaign that they jive with more, and can leave the other game that he wasn't having fun with. That is the ultimate purpose of D&D, right? To have fun. And if you're not having fun at a particular table, why stay at it? So for this story, I say all's well that ends well. But that is all I have for you today. As always, I appreciate all of you, especially if you like and subscribe, and may your games remain horror story free. Until next time.